Do you believe in the existence of extraterrestrials?
Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where and when you're watching this broadcast. I'm Thomas Fessler, my friends, and this is Disclosure Tonight. Happy Monday, February 17th, 2024. Did everybody have a good weekend? Did your Monday go well? Because we know how Mondays go for a lot of us. On that note, let me go ahead and jump into the studio if I can. We've got a great show ahead of us. We have a special guest this evening. We're talking about the age of presidential disclosure with Allan Lavigne. Who is Allan? Well, Allan is a former investigator for the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization, also known as Appo, from 1974 to 1980. He went on a two-pronged career path spanning more than 45 years as both a physical security specialist and intelligence analyst in the private sector, working closely with the Joint Terrorist Task Force, FBI, and Homeland Security. He is also an entertainment artist, and his early work can be seen in the 1979 documentary UFOs Are Real, for which Appo was the sole technical advisor. In more recent years, Allan has done work for Sony Pictures on Iron Man 1 and 2, Marvel Entertainment, Disney, Lucasfilms, and others. There are permanent exhibits of his work at the San Francisco Cartoon Art Museum and the San Diego Comic-Con Museum in San Diego's Balboa Park. Now, you may recognize Allan from his time that he spent over on Richard Dolan's Intelligent Disclosure. Richard's interviewed him several times, and he is a very active member in their forums. Mike, my friend, it looks like we've got a great interview tonight, my friend.
Oh, looking forward to it. It's always a lot of fun when Allan joins us on the show.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. On that, without any further delay. Allan, welcome to the show, my friend. It's great to have you back here again.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoy this. Enjoy interacting with all your friends and members of your community. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely, my friend. Now, we talk all the time back and forth on text messaging back and forth, along with Mike, the attorney to the EBEs. And one of the things that's really come up, and an important topic, is this understanding this new, I even call it the golden age of presidential disclosure that we're getting today, and the importance of it. And you've got a lot of great stuff to fill us in on today.
Yeah, I wanted to share with you. I was watching your show on Sunday, and you were talking about Representative Luna's panel, and I've gotten a lot of messages from friends and community members asking, about the panel, why they're doing what they're doing, why they've chosen the subjects they've chosen, and a lot of people, particularly in the UFO community, are going like, well, why are they, first on the list is Kennedy assassination. Well, first let me just share about the panel itself. This is very similar to what the Schumer UAP bill intended to do, is to get a team of people together to declassify documents, in that case specifically in regards to UFOs and UAPs. In this case, rather than selecting people just from the private sector, they have the oversight committee in Congress with Luna and Burchett and some of the other names, Moskowitz and some of the other people that you've seen on the news recently. And they are asking researchers and community members to contact them with any information they have, not just on UAPs or UFOs, but also on the Kennedy assassination and King and Robert Kennedy assassination, and even the Epstein list. And again, people are going like, well, why start with the Kennedy assassination? What does that have to do with this at all? Well, if you've been following the phenomenon all this time, there is a very close link between the Kennedy administration and the UFO phenomena. There's a memo that surfaced supposedly attributed to Kennedy, although the National Archives will not confirm or deny that the memo is authentic, which is one of the reasons everybody wants to get into these remaining files of Kennedy and see if this particular document's in there, which refers to Kennedy's desire for the CIA to release UFO information to the Soviets. And again, like I said, we don't know if that memo is accurate or not, but that's, you know, something that people are interested in. Now, why should they be interested in that? Well, you have to go back actually to the Eisenhower administration. Vice President Richard Nixon approved a plan coming out of the CIA called Palladium. The Palladium plan was going to use the known concern about UFOs against the Russians. There were problems, and Wendell Stevens, who was Colonel Wendell Stevens, who was also an investigator with me at AARO, had spent a lot of time in his capacity in the Air Force documenting UFOs that were flying over the Arctic, and planes photographing these and stuff, and having that material sent to Washington. Well, that was a big concern, and but the CIA thought, hey, you know, we can use this, and they put together Project Palladium, which was a radar spoofing project to spoof Russian radar so that they could fly the U-2s over that route, camouflage with all these other UFOs. Lamar Crisp was the first scientist recruited by the CIA in 1952, and was assigned to Wright-Patterson, who developed the program and put it into action. It was being run out of Japan and Pakistan. And they were sending these false radar signals, screwing up the King Tower radar in Russia, so it just nullified their air defenses. Well, when Kennedy got elected, he was very interested in space exploration, the space program, and had, like, you know, his grandnephew had a lot of interest in UFOs. And his first meeting with Khrushchev in 1961 in Vienna, Khrushchev confronted him with Project Palladium and says, hey, what are you guys doing? You're screwing up our radar. We know you're doing it, and we want you to knock it off or things are going to get serious. Well, Kennedy didn't know anything about it. This program was top secret, and he hadn't been informed. This was his first, introduction to, black ops, basically, and learning that, he wasn't in on everything. And so he immediately, upon his return, wanted to confront Allen Dulles about the situation. And that kicked the whole thing off. Backstory: 1959, Lee Harvey Oswald defects to Russia under the guise that he had been working out the Japanese base where Project Palladium had been run, so he knew all about the project. When he got to Russia, he said, "Oh, I'm going to volunteer this information." It was to prove his bona fide, status as a defector, and he said, "I can tell you where the planes are coming through, and you can take them down." And so, in fact, they did, and Gary Powers was shot down. And when they recovered the wreckage, they found Palladium equipment inside the U-2, which they put on display when they put all the wreckage together. But they already had known about Palladium, and this is why Khrushchev decided, hey, okay, you guys won't play ball with us. You're not going to stop screwing with us. We're going to just stick nukes down in Cuba. Then you're only going to have 5 minutes, and we won't have to worry about the radar being spoofed. Well, they sent Lamar Crisp to Cuba to plant a bug, a Palladium bug, in the Cuban the radar system, but he was caught and he was tortured, and they got the information out of him, and Oswald was already in the Soviet Union. They knew, they already knew about Palladium even before Oswald told them about it. but that confirmed it for him, and then they sent him off to Minsk to run a lathe, and then finally he returned to the United States. But that was the they were using the UFOs to do this. Now, in the background, this concern about nukes being in Cuba, they were looking for a defense system, and so they started. They created a new thermonuclear weapon. It was part of Project Fishbowl. People talk about, even today, if you look on the internet, they talk about it as an EMP weapon. Not exactly. It created an EMP, but not from gamma radiation, but from X-ray,
right?
High energy X-ray radiation. And interestingly enough, to do that requires a great deal of gold, a large gold sphere. Gold is unique in that on its surface, it has one electron. When that's blasted, it projects it into the orbit of another cell atomic nucleus, and it just releases all kinds of X-ray energy. So that was the plan. And what they were going to do is, in the event of a strike, they'd launch one of these weapons that would take the ICBMs out in space, all the reentry vehicles. So they wanted to experiment with this. And the first three were failures. First one burned up on the pad. The second one went up, but they thought it was off track, so they blew it up. The third one went up, but didn't gather the data that they wanted to gather. In a test attempt, they launched one. This was a dummy warhead, just to see that they had the right trajectory. And they sent up 3 planes to film this. The cameras were built by EG&G, which everyone's probably familiar with. And the vehicle was returning into the atmosphere at Mach 18. And suddenly you see in the video, and I provide the video to Thomas so he can show it. You'll see a UFO.
Did you send that via email or via text message?
Text.
Okay, I'll find that in 1 second. Hold on.
Yeah. In the film footage, it shows a UFO manifesting by the reentry vehicle and travels with it for about a minute and a half, then goes over to the other side, then disappears again.
Right. Is this is the first one? Is this the Atlas reentry vehicle test, or the one of Starship Prime?
The Atlas reentry test.
Gotcha. Give me 1 second here. I'll get that right up here.
You'll
Sorry
have to
about
look
that.
closely, people, when you see it on here, because it's very tiny, but you'll see it blink in on the lower right hand side, and it switches to the other side, and then blinks out again.
Give me 1 second. The video is about 7 minutes and 15 seconds long. Let me go ahead and get this together here. 7 minutes and 15 seconds, actually. Let me open it.
I hope that's the right one. Well, what's the length of the other one? I think
the other one is the Starship Prime one.
How long is that video?
The second one it's coming up right now. 45 seconds. It actually shows the blowing up of Prime.
Yeah. Well, maybe it is the other one. I don't know. It's the second one shows the prime explosion knocking out a UFO in the explosion. So show either one, and I can just explain it when I see it on screen.
I can bring up the other one. I can always zoom my way through it here really quick. It's pretty easy to go ahead and get there. Let me just go ahead and bring that over, bring this up, and I can go ahead and put it up large here and get it. So I'm taking over full screen with the video with us. Not that one, video guest. All right, here we go. Down a little bit more. So this one, set it down a little bit.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the right one.
All right.
You'll see down in that lower right-hand side, it's very tiny. You'll see it blink in, and then it goes to the other side of the reentry vehicle, then blinks out again. It's very hard to see. I'm looking at my phone, so it's like looking at an inch by an inch, so it's very tiny. But that's the actual footage that they took.
So I'm just trying to keep the reentry vehicle. Is it pretty close to the reentry vehicle?
It's where that white dot is. I think that's your pointer down there. It should be right in that area somewhere.
Down here, let me just zoom out a little.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. And it followed the reentry vehicle for a minute and a half and went to the other side and then blinked out. AARO has this video, and like the next video you're going to see, they said, yeah, this is authentic and it's anomalous and we don't know what that is.
Right. So this is the actual craft that's going along, following along with it then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Then you're talking...
That's Mach 18. So there was nothing at that time that could travel at Mach 18. Absolutely nothing.
Dang interesting, Alan. Wow.
Is this the video where it shoots a beam?
No,
at the incoming,
that's another one. That's from Edwards in California.
Right.
And that one's never been really released. There have been recreations of that, Mike, but we've never seen an actual video of that one.
Right, which is why I was curious if this was the actual video of that.
Right.
No.
All right. On that
Still
note.
a good video.
Oh, yeah. Should I jump to the one with the explosion, Alan?
Yeah. They show like 3 or 4 explosions. It's the very last one that shows the craft. You'll see it. You're looking down at the fireball, which is actually above the ground in space, and you'll see the UFO shoot across the top.
So let me just go to the end. Actually, it's only 45 seconds. So
yeah.
Fishbowl. Here's Starfish. First one.
Yeah, it's got music.
Here's the second one. There in the middle. There we go. And here. That must be the third one.
I think it's the very next one right
there
after
we go.
this.
Silent. Fishbowl XR summary. There we go.
I think you got a little bit too close there.
Okay. This one's not showing the ship falling on it though.
Yeah. I think you're in too close.
I'm not zoomed in at all.
Okay. Well, maybe it's the one right after this then.
No, there's only.
It's the last.
That's the last one, and it goes that one.
Okay.
Let's go back to this one. I'll see if I can find it though as you're talking. Go ahead.
Okay. The explosion was much more impactful than they expected it to be. The X-ray effect, it shut down lights all the way down in New Zealand. It affected a radius of more than 1,000 miles with the X-ray impact, and it left a radiation belt in space for years to come. When that, after it was all over, there were 3 pods, and I sent you a picture of one of the pods. That's that white capsule-looking thing that I sent via text. Those pods were used to measure the impact of the device, the radiation, all that, and so they had to collect those after the test.
These guys. That is the USNS Point Barrow involved in.
That's the ship that they sent out to when they started recovering these pods from the explosion. They discovered debris that they didn't know what it was.
Right.
These large spears, and the USNS Barrel was only there for observation. It wasn't there to do anything. It was only supposed to take measurements of the ionosphere. And then they tasked it with recovering this anomalous craft. It's believed that that's what they did because the USNS Barrel's logs have mysteriously disappeared. But it was the only ship in that contingent that was highly, highly radioactive. Many of the crew members got cancers and stuff. In fact, historically, it's they had more people get cancer that were on that ship than anybody than any other ship in the Navy during these nuclear tests.
Oh, wow.
So the belief is that is the ship that they used to recover this craft that was downed, and that's later corroborated in other testimonies coming out now that some of the scientists have been speaking out about craft that they've worked on. One of them was from this Johnson Atoll explosion, and that's that illustration I sent you there from Richard's book, if you have that handy.
Yes, I do. I believe it's this one here. Oh, dang it. I go to the wrong window and it blows it up on me. Is it this one here, I believe? Let's bring it up and cross my fingers here. Video, full guest. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's... I actually used, for that illustration, I actually used the actual explosion and then rendered in the ship on that. But that story appears in Richard's book in this first volume, talking about the experiment of the downed craft.
Right.
So there's a nexus to the Kennedy administration and UFOs and recovered craft. And this is how they first learned, hey, high yield X-rays, we were talking about scalar weapons before we got on the air, high yield X-rays can bring these crafts down. And of course, they've been using, energy weapons of various types, EMP style weapons to bring down drones, to bring down other types of aircraft. And I believe that's what their high yield X-ray weapons are likely one in an arsenal of weapons that they're using to bring these craft down. So there is an elephant in the room that I've been musing about, that because of the talk of telepathic communication with these ships to lure them in and stuff. And I go, like, the one thing I can't explain is if in fact you could bring these crafts down with a simple thought, as far as battlefield conditions are concerned, they wouldn't be of much use. I mean, if you can literally, have a child think about this thing and plummet it to the ground, I can't see that's much of a super weapon, no matter how fast it goes or if it can cloak or whatever.
Right.
So there's got to be more to it than that, because DARPA has been experimenting since the 1990s with using brainwaves to control aircraft, both from the ground and in the pilot's seat. But if it can be hijacked with a simple thought, you'd go like, well, I want to fly by wire. Forget this, thought thing, because I don't want anyone hijacking my aircraft and, crashing me into the ground.
Right.
But hopefully that's more information will come out about that, because it doesn't seem to me, and I know Dr. Greer is all saying how peaceful these things are. I know non-human intelligence is going to just again and again fall for Lucy and the football and be lured into the siren song and be killed or captured.
Yeah, it seems a bit odd. That's why I actually prefer my eggs over easy.
Yeah. We wouldn't be calling them non-human intelligence. We'd be calling them non-intelligent humanoids, if that was the case. Because you go like, no, I've fallen for this 100 times. So that's why the board wants to start here, get all these documents, these remaining documents out, and follow the where they lead. Because just like Doge is finding all this money, Kennedy was very upset that they were using large amounts of gold for these failed tests. They were pilfering it from the U.S. Treasury. And in the Clinton administration, they did do a Doge-like audit of the Department of Energy and found that they were hoarding 10,000 pounds of gold and silver there at the DOE. And again, it was pilfered. It wasn't legally acquired. They just did some, shuffling and took it.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to find similar things now, particularly once we get into the Pentagon, once we get into the DOE, that similar things are going on. They had, during that Clinton administration audit, they had 700 million barrels of oil that they were hoarding, other hoards of plutonium and uranium, undeclared. These, now you would expect, because of the Department of Energy, they're going to have some radioactive materials, but this was, I want to be clear that this was undeclared materials. This wasn't on the books. This was stuff they had gotten illegally and were hoarding, and there was no record of that they were using for who knows what. And we can only imagine if there are such thing as alien reproduction vehicles, that these materials may be used, in the construction propulsion of these craft. So because it would have to be off the books. You've got to hide it some way. And just like we're seeing with these witnesses coming forward, whistleblowers, there's a difference between secret compartmentalized black ops and off the books operations. It's like Mission Impossible. The secretary will deny any knowledge of your thing. These are people that are just tasked, go do this, and they volunteer, but there's nothing on the books. And that's been the whole problem with the legacy program to begin with, and that's why it's become so unwielding. Because if you look at Curceau's writing, Colonel Curceau, he said, hey, we just talked. We just said this. We never wrote anything down. And I know when I was at AARO, working with Jim Lorenzen, who was former intelligence, I was instructed, don't write anything down. Don't do that.
Right.
And later on, working with DHS, that was another thing. If there was something of confidential nature, don't write it down.
Right.
Because you don't want, it will turn up when you least expect it, at the wrong time in the wrong place. Look at USAID. I mean,
what a mess.
I'm sure they wish they had a chipper shredder to throw in all those documents in, because there's all kinds of trouble. That's why you don't write this stuff down. And the fact that nothing was ever written down when someone died in the legacy program, their secret died with them unless they made a deathbed confession. So nobody really knows how many tentacles are on the octopus. And when someone like Ross says, hey, I've got whistleblowers, you don't know what I've got, and I've got these videos, I've got this, and they're coming forward, everyone's sweating bullets, going like, oh, are they talking about me? Are they talking about my program? Are they talking about what we're doing here? Because nobody knows. The right hand does not know what the left hand's doing. So, and a lot of these whistleblowers are coming forward now, and I think you're going to see some industry people doing the same thing.
But one thing really quick, though, Allan, is Anna Paulina Luna, and especially the group that they've put together, is they just don't want whistleblowers. They're looking to actually bring out, sounds like, evidence of this stuff. So it's almost, we've had a lot of whistleblowers been coming out and talking, and we get a lot of great stories, and we get a lot of people who stand up for people's characters, but there's nothing there to prove anything that they've got going. And it sounds like Anna Paulina wants to take it to the next level. What are your thoughts?
Yes, and it has been to the Select Intelligence Committee for the Senate and the Armed Services and the House, starting in 2019. They did present physical evidence, not just whistleblower testimony, but videos, radar data, and other signals data, metamaterials, etc. This was all done. I mean, there were 21 members of both the House and Senate Select Intelligence Committee, and that's been working for, now we're going on almost 4 years. So the physical evidence is there, but she's not, until this point, has not been allowed to see that. That's why they pulled David's security clearance, so he couldn't bring him into a skiff and say, yeah, let me show you.
But do you think he actually took stuff with him when he left? Because that would be against national security, that even though you have security privileges, you're not allowed to take a lot of this data out of a skiff.
No, but Rubio has seen it. Rubio knows where it is. He was head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So this isn't something that no one has seen. Luna hasn't seen the physical evidence, but other people within the Senate and the Congress and the Armed Services Committee and the Inspector General's office have seen the actual physical evidence. It's just no one else can see it yet. They've moved heaven and earth to prevent anybody else from getting into a skiff with any of these other whistleblowers or that physical evidence. But it does exist.
But you actually have to mean former inspector generals, because weren't they all released?
Yeah, Atkinson was canned. He was canned. Trump canned him, and he just was dragging his feet. He had enough probable cause. He had names. He could have made a referral to the House and to the DOJ to bring people in, swear out warrants, arrest people, etc. And he just wouldn't do it.
And I believe one of the main reasons that they got rid of all these inspector generals is because the inspector generals were not impartial. They were acting pretty much at the behest of the agency that they should be investigating and figuring out if we're doing things wrong, versus going ahead and finding reasons not to do the investigations and reasons to continue the cover-up.
Exactly. And now with the new administration, we hope we can get past all that. I mean, if the president says, hey, I want Luna in a skiff with these witnesses and their evidence, that's going to happen now. Before, they were just, like I said, moving heaven and earth to prevent that from happening. And they pulled David's. So David, people think of him like the Lone Ranger. He's not a Lone Ranger. He headed the investigation. He had several investigators with him. They all went out. They took statements.
Or just sign his name and make it happen.
What's that?
He'll just sign his name on a piece of paper and make it happen.
Yeah, that's what we're looking forward to. And as I said, they're beginning with Kennedy because that era there from 1952 when they had the Washington flyover into the Kennedy administration, so much was going on. You have the Townsend Brown experiments. Did they do anything? We had the 1954 atomic energy regulations that prevented the president from looking at classified information in the Department of Energy. So all this veil has to be pulled apart so we can get in there and actually let everyone see the evidence. But it does exist. And people have been, Lukatsky's been pretty open about that. He says he in fact went into a ship, opened it up. Dave talked about a ship that's he's seen that still drawing electrical power. They don't know from where. And of course, Ross is famous for talking about his giant UFO that's hidden somewhere. And again, Rubio knows where that is. Rubio knows that.
Right.
He was the head of the Intelligence Committee when that information came forward. So this information is out there. Just Luna doesn't yet have it. But they're starting with Kennedy because this is really the beginning of when all this occurred. From the Eisenhower administration into the Kennedy administration, when all the shenanigans began, and they strong-armed it right through the 60s after Kennedy's death. Now, of course, he was assassinated 10 days after the memo to Allen Dulles saying, hey, I want to know, I want you to open up the CIA files and share them with UFOs with the Russians and everything.
I believe this one here, right?
Yeah, well, now this comes from his actual appointment book that shows that he, on the day of that memo, he did meet with Kennedy twice that day. Now, that was always originally that memo, which was considered questionable because the National Archives wouldn't substantiate whether it was true or not. No one knew, if Allen Dulles had met with him. That was secret. This came out in 2004 it's 2022 when the Trump released some of the Kennedy archives. And this showed that, in fact, Allen Dulles had met with Kennedy twice on the day of that memo, and that memo was part of the 1995 MJ-12 documents, which had always been questionable. But no one knew this at the time those documents were released. So we believe it was a Russian, Tarzarov, who delivered those documents to Ryan Wood and his partner, who later released the documents. And he was a CIA asset. He was actually the one who translated the man believed to be Oswald at the Cuban embassy when he defected at the Cuban embassy. He did the translation for the CIA. And he was also at one time assigned to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So there's all these connections between the UFO phenomenon and Kennedy and the Kennedy assassination. All the names that you've heard of in relationship to that assassination all pop up in these different documents. And although I was dubious about the MJ-12 documents, when you start looking at the direct routing numbers, you can see there's one document where you can see just a partial of the routing, and it fits. This is a routing number that the CIA did use right up to the 60s. It was MG rather than MJ, and then they went to MK, like MK Ultra. These were allowed the documents to be routed directly to CIA station heads.
Right.
And that was something that, again, no one would have known in 1984, 1995, but it is included in these documents.
Right.
So that's something, again, once we get into these remaining documents that both the FBI has just revealed and that are still in the National Archives, we'll get some more information.
If we can, really quick, Alice has had her hand up for a while.
Sure, please.
Thank you, Thomas. Hi, Alan. I have a question for you.
Sure.
I'm not familiar with your history, and I'm wondering, have you been up close and personal with a craft or a being? Have you ever seen one in real life?
Yes, twice. Once in 1974 and a second one in 1979. I did a number of interviews with Richard detailing that. The 1970, I was very I was delighted when Jake talked about the egg, because that's what I saw in 1979. It landed, well, there's a lot more to the story, but it landed literally just on the other side of my driveway. And it was a luminous lavender blue, which I didn't know at the time when plasma interacts with the atmosphere because of nitrogen oxygen composition. The plasma will glow lavender blue, something I didn't know at the time, but that I observed on this craft. And it had these spindly little legs. I don't know if you have access to it, Thomas, but I did a model of that ship. I don't know if you have access to it on your equipment now, but maybe later you can show a picture of that model. What I saw in the doorway of that craft that night, it was about 11 o'clock at night, was what I to this day describe was some type of robot. I describe it. It literally looked like Gumpy with a human head. That had no eyes, had no features. It just but a human like head, and it was the same cast color of the ship, and it was motioning to me like wanting me to come outside. Later on, and again, there's a lot more to the story. I did see two what I believe to be grays, and I can say with certainty that since that time, I've only seen one thing that really looked like what I saw, the grays that I saw, and that was a death mask that was supposed to be part of a reveal with the Carter administration. And again, there's a lot more detail to this. Yeah. And Richard and I and Danny Sheehan, we're going to do a show here in the next month or so talking about the first time an attempt at disclosure was made, which was in the late 70s with the Carter administration, and talk about everything that revolved. But there was I don't know the provenance of it, but it was a part of that reveal was a death mask, and it looked exactly like what I saw.
Yeah.
Like I said, I saw two of these creatures. One visibly appeared much older than the first one I saw. The second one I saw, its head was a little bit misshapen, more elongated, like the Peruvian type heads.
Mm-hmm.
But the first one seemed much younger, much the other one, I often think of it as grumpy. It looked grumpy. It didn't look like it was happy to be there. But the first one seemed younger, and that was in 1979, March 16th, about approximately 11 p.m. at night, on the edges of Tucson, state of Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting.
Absolutely. Picking
if you
back
get a
up.
chance, go to Intelligent
Disclosure?
Richard's site on YouTube and just put in my name. I'll bring up all my videos, and you can hear the whole story, how I got involved with Appo. And
Actually, we have that. We have a video here on Disclosure tonight as well that you were on. I can't see what date this was on, but yeah, we have one here called Forgotten UFO History with you, Allan. So I will share that link with the chat and people in the back.
Great.
Yeah, I'll be looking that up. Thank you.
Absolutely. Back to talking about Anna Paulina Luna.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're just waiting for the next shoe to drop. They've got 6 months to. That's the life of the committee right now. It can be extended. People go, "Oh, they won't be able to do all this in 6 months," and they won't. Yeah, I mean, they just put a fence around the ballpark so no one's dragging their feet. You got 6 months to do this. Let's do this, and they can always extend it
Right.
when they as things go on, and they likely will have to. I think you could spend probably 6 months just on the Kennedy assassination alone. Luna has come out and said directly, and she's one of the few politicians brave enough to say it, that she believes there were two shooters, and of course, that was the committee, and I believe it was 1977, had concluded the same thing, that the assassination was a result of conspiracy. And there's clear physical evidence even now that you can look up online, like Governor Connolly's X-ray. His leg shows that there are bullet fragments in the leg, which would have been impossible if the magic bullet was the one that went through caused 7 wounds. It would have been deformed. It would have fragments missing. Now we know the Secret Service has come out and said, I forget his name, that no, that bullet that was on the stretcher he found in the back seat of the car. Which I have to ask, what didn't he come up with? It's not like nobody knew that bullet was in question all this time. I mean, it's been the subject of dozens of documentaries. And anybody who knows anything about ballistics knows that a pristine bullet couldn't have possibly gone through 7 people through a risk without a deformity or fragmenting. So that in itself shows that whatever it was in Connolly's leg was not the bullet that he found in the back seat, obviously. And then there's also the missing skull fragment. We know from the autopsy photos that the hole in that skull fragment is too small for a Micklicker Carcano, but it is not too small for a 223. Which the M16 and the 223 round was relatively new at that time in the early 60s, but it was being used. So that's a second thing that says it's impossible that whoever was shooting, if it was Oswald or someone else, it's impossible that a Micklicker Carcano round made that hole in the back of the skull. Also, too, a question I've always had. If in fact Oswald was the shooter, let's just say he was, why in the hell would you leave your revolver at home? If you're going to commit an assassination, you're going to want some backup just in case. But he brings his rifle, but leaves his revolver at home, and then he knows they're looking for him, and he's going to go to his house to go get his gun. Come on, that's never made any sense to me at all. Never made any sense to me at all. So, and of course, he was identified as being in the lunchroom when they were searching the building. So it doesn't appear time-wise that he could have been in the shooter's nest when the actual shooting occurred. But was he involved? it does look like he was involved in some fashion. He definitely was a CIA asset. Like I said, he was working at the Japanese base in, I believe it was Aceto. I don't think I'm pronouncing that correctly, where Palladium Palladium was being run. So, and he wouldn't have been there if he had been just a regular private there. No way in the world would he have been on that base. It was a CIA base. So.
Interesting to say the absolute least. My gosh. Yeah, I guess it shows the importance, I guess, of going ahead and trying to bring out the Kennedy information first. I mean, it's a very huge, if you want to call it, stigma. It's a big question mark that has perplexed our country for too many years to count.
Which is interesting because there have been other presidential assassinations, McKinley and of course Lincoln, and there was an attempt on Ford's life right here in the Bay Area, up in Sacramento. So it's not like, and of course Reagan as well. No one is there hasn't been as much interest in any of those as there has been the Kennedy assassination. Of course, it was the CIA, admittedly, that coined the phrase conspiracy theorists. To discourage people from debunking this, that was their way of ridiculing, people that didn't believe the story,
right?
And that has stuck ever since there. So you're looking at the granddaddy, the original conspiracy theory. If this falls away, the next question is going to be, okay, if you were lying to us about this, what about the UFOs? What about, Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy? And the Bobby Kennedy case is another one that just stands out. He was shot from behind. Sirhan was in front of him. So he had a contact wound to the back of his head. Noguchi talks about that in the autopsy. There's no way Sirhan never got more than 5 feet close to him from the front. So clearly he was shot from behind. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But and of course, his son, Robert Kennedy Jr., has been very vocal about this. And so it's another thing. We need to know what was going on, who was involved, because everyone seems to have been involved in this. We're also involved in these other plots, Palladium and bringing down UFOs with X-rays, and all these people, they're all linked, they're all intertwined. So you have to start someplace. And the UFO phenomenon, if you would just say, okay, we want to start investigating this, where would you even begin? Would you go back to the Italian recovery, to Mussolini and try and find that? This is a good launch. The Kennedy assassination is a good launching point. And if you debunk that as that was a conspiracy, if you say, hey, this was a conspiracy, people are going to be much more open to, okay, you're lying about that. Maybe they UFOs are real, and maybe they do have craft, and maybe we do have vehicles that, anti-gravity vehicles and stuff. But it's a good place to start. If I was to point my finger and say, where do we want to start on this schedule to release this stuff, I would pick that. Yeah. I think it's very good.
You could pick that, then you could go up to Roswell and just continue down the pipe from there. But
yeah, because a lot of the people connected with Palladium, the scientists like Lamar Crisp and others, are also related to the Roswell capture. So it's there. And as those that haven't seen my videos with Richard, you'll see that I was the first one to interview Colonel Jesse Marcel when he came forward. He had contacted Jim, who was, ex-Air Force, and I was the first one to interview him with Jim, although I was the principal interviewer. We did a telephonic interview of that. And then later on that film that you mentioned in my bio, UFOs Are Real, we did the first film release of Jesse's story. But it wasn't unknown. We already did know the elements surrounding Roswell, and there was no doubt in our minds that it was captured. And when we got to the Carter administration wanting to do a disclosure, what Jim told, I asked Jim directly, I said, do they intend to release the Roswell craft? And he says, yes. And I said, do they intend to release the bodies? And he said, yes. It was going to be part of the reveal. And I wouldn't want to spoil it for you, but you'll have to go to the video to see more detail how they were going to do that and stuff, which was kind of, I thought at the time, kind of loopy, but now today it makes perfect sense why they would have wanted to do that back in the late 70s, how they were going to do it. It made perfect sense. And even today, as people keep asking about, and it's really frustrating, community members keep saying, oh, we want proof, like Luna, we want evidence. Okay, what is evidence? What's the bar? I mean, if any of this information that we have today had come out in the 70s, it would have been, that's it. We've got disclosure. They're saying that UFOs are real and they're showing us videos of them and everything. It would have been disclosure. But today the bar keeps going out further and further. And so what would evidence be? Well, the Carter administration had thought about that, and they'd come up with a solution how they were going to get everybody on board and everyone get firsthand look at this stuff.
Yeah.
And I even think today, something of that nature, that's how you would really have to do it for everyone to really buy into it. You couldn't just show the craft on TV or on the internet.
Yeah.
People wouldn't buy it.
Sam brings out a good point from the chat. A frozen dead alien is evidence, and it's probably something people will then believe.
Yeah, that was the intention of the Carter administration back then. And Nixon is very interesting because under the Eisenhower administration, Nixon was the one, as I shared, that greenlit Palladium. He was very interested in the UFO phenomenon, as you know the story about him and Jackie Gleason, who was a big UFO, interested in UFOs, and claims that Jackie Gleason told his wife that Nixon had actually taken him to a base in Florida and shown him alien bodies. And again, back when that information came out, that was really considered unique. But now I've heard so many people, particularly in the military, said, yeah, we've seen bodies. And it was the intention, as I was sharing, for the Carter administration to, share these bodies with everyone, actually take them around and everyone get a chance to look at them.
Yeah.
And too, of course, back in I think there was only 220 million Americans back then in the late 70s. So it was a much smaller country at the time. There were only 3 television networks. I don't count PBS. And they only ran from 5 in the morning till midnight, and then went off the air.
Yeah.
It was a much different world. You only had access really to your hometown newspaper. No one was, reading the New York Times or the Los Angeles Times unless you lived in New York or Los Angeles. So it was much more limited information. Now,
if you remember back in the day, I believe it was back in the late 60s, if not 70s, Uri Geller had visited NASA with Werner von Braun. And I'm not sure if it was Goddard or somewhere, but he took him into a facility, went multiple stories underground, put on a big old thick orange NASA parka, and they took him into the freezer and he showed him some frozen aliens.
Yeah, Geller he was a superstar back then in the 70s. And as I was sharing, telepathy in the 70s, this is when Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ were experimenting down south here at Stanford with remote viewing and telepathy, and had Ingo Swann and McDonough. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Bill McGonigal?
Working with them. And they had, at least an 80% accuracy. Uri, same thing. He's been tested under controlled conditions. Now, is he also a showman? Yes, he's also a showman. Okay, he's like a lot of people in the telepathy space. There's real, and then there's carnival tricks.
Yeah.
But does he really have a telepathic ability? I believe so, from what I've seen in the research that was done with him.
Yeah.
I don't, maybe I'm being naive, but when we look at right now, I'm communicating with people all over the planet with this little box here, which would have been unimaginable in the 1970s, to wirelessly communicate with someone like this. Why in the world would anyone think that there's not some type of wireless communication between minds? I mean, we do know that the brain emits different waves that can connect with equipment. Like I said, DARPA is already using this to control aircraft. You can buy drones online right now on Amazon, where you put a little cap on and you control the drone with your brain waves. So if you can do that, can you go further? Can you transmit further? I think you can. I just don't see a barrier to that. It's certainly been part of historical, the history of the human race for eons, talking about telepathy and remote viewing. Look at Joan of Arc. There are a number of what I would call remote viewing incidents regarding her, and when she saw was looking at the Battle of Paris, and also found the sword underneath the altar, in St. Michael's, supposedly St. Michael's sword. So it's not a new thing. Remote viewing or telepathy has been written about for years. I think there's really something to it. And I have never met anyone that didn't have some incident in their life where they telepathically knew something that they shouldn't have known.
Like you think about someone and then the phone rings and it's that person, stuff along those lines.
Exactly. I can tell you, well, what was it? It was just the other day. I was asking a friend, he had ordered, I texted him. I said, hey, did those sweaters you ordered came? He says, no. He says, I've been. And just as I'm saying that, an announcement, alert on his phone came in that the sweaters were on their way. And you go like, he was baffled by that. How was that? Because we didn't name the type of sweaters or the company or whatever. I was just asking about the sweaters. And suddenly it pops up on his phone that the sweater's coming in that day. It's coincidence? Maybe. But there are just too many coincidences. And as I shared, there's everybody has some story or multiple stories in their life about things that occurred to them, that they knew about things that they shouldn't have known. And I definitely have stories like that that I've shared it, with people. And I don't know of anybody that doesn't have that. So
it's something that's it seems to be inherent to humanity in general. Some people stronger, some people less.
Yeah, it's just like, some people can join the NBA and they're going to be great, but other people aren't. It's can you develop it? Apparently you can make it stronger, but like at any trait, any human trait, some people are going to be better at than others. I know people can speak 8 or 9 languages. I certainly can't, but they're just good at that. They're something in their brain, something in their learning capacity allows them to pick up languages really easy and communicate like that. Well, I believe there definitely is some type of method, physical method. It's not, woo-woo. There's some type of emission between brains that you can telepathically communicate. And I want to differentiate that. And I've often shared this with Richard. I differentiate that from mind reading. In all the interviews I did when I was at AARO, where telepathic communication arose, and I'll single one out, the Betty Barney Hill investigation. They never read Betty's mind. Yeah. They communicated with her, the leader communicated with her telepathically, asking her questions, but he couldn't read her mind. No. If he could have read her mind, he wouldn't have had to ask her any questions. But it's just like speaking over radio as opposed to speaking verbally. Right. The other aliens in the craft spoke to the leader in a language that Betty said that she didn't understand. Some of them could speak broken English, but she said was very bad. but the leader communicated with her telepathically, but he did not read her thoughts.
Right.
And I never met anyone in the interviews I conducted Bill Herman, Travis Walton, where any of them said that they could read my thoughts. It's just that they communicated telepathically. In Travis's case, they didn't. I mean, they just motioned to him what they want him to do. They didn't communicate with him telepathically.
Now, Allan, I will admit, playing canasta in the past with many people, I have leveraged the power of suggestion for my benefit. If you've got it, use it.
Yeah, influencing someone telepathically, again, it's not the same as reading their thoughts, because reading their thoughts they have to form that thought for you to read it, and at that point, if they're forming a thought, then they're communicating telepathically. But influencing someone telepathically, placing a suggestion in their brain, I believe that's highly possible. There's back in the 70s, there was a movie, a friend of mine, Rick Baker, worked on it, did the make special effects on that, called The Fury with Kirk Douglas, about psychic spies and psychic assassins. If you haven't seen that movie, it's very interesting. If you can watch it, it's on YouTube, it's on IBM or IBF or whatever it is, the entertainment place.
Right.
You can watch it. It's interesting. You're like, oh yeah, they were thinking about this stuff way back then.
Well, look at the movie Firefox, another one.
Yeah. It's this use of telepathy to control things has been around a long time. As I said, though, the elephant in the room is how easy can these things be brought down? I just can't believe it's so easy that an autistic child can bring out crap with a single thought.
But it's not just autistic children. They have men who are gay, apparently left-handed, who they use as their psyop guys to go ahead and put on a monitor to see what's going on with their brain waves, and they're able to go ahead, project emotion outward, and grab onto a craft and bring it down, although they don't have any evidence of it yet.
I just think that's just too easy. I mean, the craft would be almost worthless if it was that easy to bring it down. Yeah. I mean, to me, maybe it is. Maybe it's just an Achilles heel that this is something they've never experienced anywhere else in the universe or wherever they're from. But I just think that would be so risky. Just imagine if you could bring an airliner down like that. I mean, do you want someone practicing CE5 in their basement to start crashing UFOs all over the place? I go like, it can't be that easy. There's something they're not saying. There's something that gives them an in that they're not saying. And I can imagine they wouldn't say that because then anybody could do it.
And don't do it out in the middle of nowhere like the Mojave Desert. Bring it down right in front of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Bring it down in Times Square. Bring it down in a spot where there would be so many people around and everyone would bring out their phone that it's not just a little clique of 40 or 50 people that were invited to a special event funded by billionaires to go ahead and do a demonstration of something.
Well, I think this is the plan going forward, particularly once we get into Luna's panel, that this will be part of the evidence, that they'll be doing a demonstration. Again, these things just having, and I know, Mike, if you're still there, you've been in Washington, these things they're not like, I mean, people get into their offices like 10 in the morning, by the time everything's settled down, all the briefings and stuff, and maybe they have 4 or 5 good hours. Although it's funny, they'll come, people in Congress or Senate, they'll say, oh yeah, I get into my office at 5 o'clock in the morning. Nothing really happens till 10. It really doesn't. You might be going through your emails, you might be going through, files or whatever, but nothing really happens. No meetings or anything are planned till 10 in the morning. Well, unless
you're the president, because supposedly the lights in the Oval Office are going on before 5:30 every single morning.
Yeah, Trump is he's just the Energizer Bunny, and he's hit the ground running. You compare that, I don't want to offend anybody, but you can compare that with the last administration. They were calling press covers at 10 in the morning. No more, no more. And he was limited to only not 10 minutes, 15 minutes. He was limited to 9 minutes. That's all they would allow him, to confer with the press, to speak with the press. Now, people just can't keep up with Trump and Elon. I mean, they're just going 24/7. Elon's loving it. He's relishing it. He's a kid in the candy store. And again, we've only scratched the surface. U.S. aid, I'm very familiar with them, going all the way back to the war on terror. They've always been a shady organization, and they're talking about NGOs. Wait till they get into nonprofits. You think the NGOs are bad? I'll tell you, these 501(c)(3)s.
Well, they're in the Treasury, and they found a single untraceable line item in the Treasury that's responsible for over $4.7 trillion in payments with no history.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I had a case, a very high-profile case. I can't say the name of the person because they didn't go after him, but he had put together 5 phony 501(c)(3)s. He was involved with Middle East terrorism, and he was paying himself with grants, this kind of money laundering scheme, at the tone of close to $1 million. He paid for an operation, and we had videotape of him being given 2 medals by Hamas, and we had a letter from the leader of Hamas thanking him for his material support, and we brought that to an individual who was the DA in California at that time. I won't name her, but she refused to prosecute.
Yeah,
and we had this guy just lock, stock, and barrel, and they wouldn't go after him, and he's still free to this day. And that was just one. I mean, it was like shooting ducks in a barrel, looking at these different 501(c)(3)s, how many were just stealing money, just stealing it right and left. How they were operating, and they made no bones. They will write one thing in the description for the 501(c), and then on their webpage, it was like they were full-on terrorists. They made no bones about it. And working with IRS agents at the time, literally there were only 7 enforcement agents for the entire San Francisco Bay Area, San Francisco County, and everything. And again, there's no way they could go after all these. There's no way. And you'd have to almost have, there was like a threshold. It had to be well over $1 million to even whet their interest to go after someone with the IRS enforcement thing. And there was another one, it was more a criminal case where this woman literally was wanted in all 50 states for, fraud and embezzlement and stuff. And we did get her, U.S. Marshals caught her coming out of work. And I said, we got to go get the husband. And we were too late. And he had grabbed the hard drive out of his computer and fried in the microwave oven. But he got away. But she was in for millions and millions of dollars. She had been doing this all over the country, using 501(c)(3)s and working for 501(c)(3)s and stealing money and laundering it and stuff. And so, like I said, I could tell you hundreds of stories like that. So they're really just scratching the tip here. I don't want people to be disheartened, because there are very good people working in law enforcement, in DHS, in the FBI, in the CIA, that really want to do good work. This stuff happens at the highest level. The people the bosses that you can't go after. You don't know what they're doing. They have access to everything, and they can do shifty things. And if they're in cahoots with the accounting departments in these things, oh man, Katie bar the door. They can do all kinds of damage. And the only way to, we just got to go through it, and it's going to hurt pulling that Band-Aid off. And people talk about ontological shock with the government or with UFOs. wait till you see what's going on with the government. You want to get ontological shock? Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. People are going to go, my God, it's one of those things I always, when you start a criminal investigation, you go like, I suspect, from the elements of the case and stuff, this is what's happening. But every time you got into it, it was so much worse than you could even imagine. Oh my God, they're doing all this. I can't believe it. And that's what we're finding out now. We think, I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't have said there's waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. But who knew? You're talking billions of dollars,
if not trillions, for that matter. I mean, look, there's 21 million, there's 21 trillion of unaccounted funds that have gone to the DOD that they can't account for where the money's been spent. So maybe we're going to get some answers on where maybe some of the money has went.
Yeah, and so it's, if there are some rogue operations out there with alien reproduction vehicles and stuff, I wouldn't be shocked. Could you leverage that and blackmail countries with, a rogue kind of pirate cartel like that? Yeah, you probably could.
It could, but do we really have alien reproduction vehicles? We've been heard so many times, Allan, that we lack the material science necessary to try and recreate this stuff. I could see us taking potentially parts from down craft, harvesting it and using it in combination with our technology. But it sounds like, at least from top science like Dr. Eric Davis, Mike can back me up on this one, that we lack that technology. Mike?
Absolutely, yeah. No, he said clearly recently on the Jesse Michaels interview, while he was eating his salad, he said that he was trained, not just as a scientist, but he went through the security classifications and training protocols to be the one who enforces the classification and security of these special access programs. So he was all the way from the top, and he said, we do not have the ability to recreate these materials. We are not producing alien reproduction vehicles. It's fiction, not reality.
We know for certain that the B2 uses electromagnetic graphity to lighten its mass.
Take it, Mike.
That's great. Then I need to see the proof of that.
What I'm sharing with alien reproduction vehicles, we may not have anti-gravity in the same sense that these have, but there is good evidence that possibly these triangular craft use a similar way of reducing inertia and mass, but still use kinetic propulsion. But it just lightens the craft to the point, and its inertia, that it can defy certain physical laws. It doesn't mean that it's anti-gravity or that it can go out in space or whatever, but there's a higher technology than. Now, remember too, this is in the private sector, and they're not sharing stuff with everybody. I mean,
but Dr. Jack Sarfati,
no one knew about Jake because he was totally off the books. And what I'm sharing about a pirate cartel and what equipment they may or may not have, I'm just saying, would it surprise me if tomorrow they said, yeah, we have this and this is how it works, and you don't need, material laid down in an atomic layer at a time. We're using just whatever, some composite material, whatever.
Jack Sarfati, who's been on the show, Allan, and is a personal friend, has made a statement even recently as today that we do not possess the ability to reduce the mass of an object or a craft, and that we're beyond that.
I would differ with that, and I can send you information that would differ.
Oh, absolutely, Allan. If you have any proof of that, we'd certainly like to look into that, without a doubt.
Yeah. It's what the my family worked at Hughes Aircraft their entire life, and they got that job from a friend of the family. His name was Thomas Merrow, who worked at Area 51 on the SR-71 Blackbird, and so a lot of the information that I didn't even know was secret at the time, was talked about at a dinner table all the time, what they were doing, how things were made. And No, there are methods. And I'll share that with you. Probably not tonight, but tomorrow.
Well, whenever you have it, that's fine. No rush. Whatever you send me, I'll send over to Jack, and I'll have him go over it. Have him take a look at it.
Jack Safardi.
Jack Safardi,
yeah. I love that guy. He's a hoot, a real wild man, and I just wish he would play nicer with others. No, I really think he is brilliant, and he knows a lot more than he's saying. I know he knows a lot about the USOs and what's under the water and stuff, and he just won't talk about it. He'll say he knows about it, but he won't talk about it.
Well, if you get on the phone with him privately, like me and Thomas have, you'll lose a lot of hours that'll go by very quickly just talking to him about many things.
Yeah. He's very knowledgeable. I just wish he would play nicer with others, because I really do think he's brilliant, but he's one of those personalities, not unlike Nicholas Tesla, who was just too difficult to work with.
Yeah.
Oh, he is a personality.
But Mike, he was very articulate and very perfect and on key completely, calling out LM as Mr. Wikipedia.
No, you're right. He absolutely was. But he's a New Yorker through and through. And his personality stood out. And he is very intelligent. So, yeah, without a doubt. But if Allan has any actual evidence that he can show us, we can run it by Jack and see what he thinks. It'll be fun.
Not even that. The guys over at Falcon Aerospace, they've been working really hard to try and reduce the mass of objects, haven't they?
They have. They also have Art's parts, the recovered craft pieces that Art Bell had that they are working on at Falcon Space. Yeah, I could run it by Mark Sokol and Jared Yates.
And that's some materials where they're going to try and go ahead and take those objects and, subject them to terahertz frequencies?
To see if it can produce a waveguide effect and levitate. Right.
Yeah, Hal wrote a paper on that when he was with NIDS.
And they had the material that Hal was working on at NIDS. Yep. Yeah,
the AARO... was the Army, I think, that they gave.
Yeah, they gave. It came from, who was it? Linda Moulton Howell. It then went to TTS with Tom DeLong and Lou. From there, it went to the Army, I believe, in Michigan. And then after they were done with it in Michigan, that's when it came back to AARO, and they said, "Oh, there's nothing here. These are terrestrial items." But they aren't, because
AARO released that. If you remember, we covered on the show. Because we worked with Jared Yates and Mark Sokol over at Falcon Space, we called bullshit on that AARO report almost immediately.
Oh, yeah.
Well, everybody knows that AARO is, I mean, they've all but admitted it's the front group. I mean, the new director said he can't part his hair without permission from the DOD. So I go like, okay, you're worthless then.
Absolutely.
It's not just the DOD, it's Susan Goff, Mike, your favorite erection killer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she was sitting right next to him when he was speaking there.
She was.
She's just glaring at him. I got a picture of her. She's just like glaring, like, oh my God. He did look really intimidated too. Maybe it's just the way he looks, but she was right there. I thought she was probably holding a gun to his waist or something behind the table.
Well, she has that look like she's holding his leash very tightly.
Yeah,
I agree, Allan.
We're not going to get anything out of AARO. As much as Kirkpatrick said, "Oh, we don't have any evidence." Well, those two videos.
There she is. There we go. There's our beautiful Susan Goff. Yeah, with her leering off to the right. Yeah. That's what she looks like.
Yeah, I got to take that out of my wallet.
Oh hell no, Allan! That's an erection killer.
No, please. That's what politics will do to you.
Yeah. Now we got her glaring at you, Allan. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can't say for certain that the technology that they're using for this came from captured craft. Now that might be where Safari, differs with me. I don't know if the technology that they're using came from down craft, or they just came up with this workaround so they could reduce mass and inertia. But it is possible.
Well, any documents or anything you have, I'll have the top scientists go over it, and we'll get to the bottom of it pretty
Well,
quickly.
it comes from top scientists, so you'll have their names on it. So,
Oh, good.
yeah,
That'll help.
so it's interesting. You know, like I said, my parents having worked at Hughes and aerospace and all, you know, their entire lives.
I have a lot of respect for Hughes. I'm familiar with them. It's a good company. They've done a lot of amazing things.
Yeah, there's just so much that they did over the years that just the general public there were projects that came up. Oh, this we don't need this anymore. Contracts come up. Another friend of mine worked at TRW and then at Ford Aerospace. And I can't tell you how many projects were funded and then they never went anywhere. They were very promising, and they'll come up with an idea and it becomes busy work, and then they just don't do anything with it. And
funny story about
hundreds of things.
Funny story about TRW, real quick. Dr. Eric Davis had stated that one of the first private contractors that actually started working on the reverse engineering of the craft was TRW.
Well, it was TRW, and then they did a split off called the Aerospace Corporation back in the day.
Right. That's right.
Well, there's also it's called the Interplanetary, got in my notes here, the Interplanetary something program, and Tarsoff was involved in that, and so was Wright Patterson. I'll have to look up that name. Okay, here it is. The Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit. And that name was declassified in 1992, and they were working. They had a cover with, of all things, the Red Cross, but they were actually a project working out of Wright Patterson, and that Red Cross thing allowed them to go to places under the odds.
Oh, it sounds like they were funded by USAID.
Yeah, they probably were. It allowed them to go into disaster areas and stuff like we've heard before, to do different things under the cover. Oh, these are Red Cross guys. No, they're Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit people, which I thought was, talk about a bizarre name. I mean, what I'd like to have known more about that, but all that's been declassified is their name. We don't know exactly what they were involved in. You know, how they operated, it's just speculation, but they were a real group, started in the 60s and ran until they were declassified in 1992. So what were they doing? I mean, with a name like that, what are you talking about? Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit? What the hell? You know? So there's a lot of things out there, and it just would not surprise me, Mike and Thomas, if there are things out there, nothing really at this point, there's nothing I've seen or been shared with me that anymore I go like, oh, that's totally impossible. Because there's so many things that have occurred that I thought were unlikely. Just what we've been talking about tonight, the connection between Kennedy's assassination and UFOs and stuff. I thought, oh, come on. Please, you're grasping at straws there. But now that I see how many people were involved and what was involved and the information and got documents for it, so we're like, maybe there is something here. Maybe there really is. And I would have called this up. So when I say that there may be things out there, craft or technology that no one knows about, it would not surprise me. It really would not anymore. Often people will ask me, because of my entertainment special effects thing, they'll send me pictures of actual aliens and videotape and stuff. And over all the years, I've only seen one photograph that we had at Appo from the Gerardo Bay incident. Well, I know that now. I didn't know that at the time. There were two photos that were lost, and when I saw the sketch of one of the photos, I go, oh, I've seen that photo. I know that exactly what that photo. It was in our retrieval file, and I'm trying to get Ryan Woods to take a look at and authenticate it. That's the only picture, only video, only film I've ever seen, other than that death mask, where I would say that looks interesting. That looks like that could be an actual alien. But that's the only one. So, but if someone said today, I know John Stewart, he's a good friend. We speak. He's still favors the alien interview video, which I contend is not authentic. I don't know how or why
It's
it was
not
created.
authentic.
Yeah.
You're right, Alan.
He puts a lot of people that see that, not knowing the industry and not knowing what's capable at that time, they go, "Oh, that looks no."
Those are people who want to believe versus people who want to see the facts, and there's a difference, Alan.
Well, I've seen other interview quote unquote videos that were better than that, but still have telltale signs that they're not authentic. But so if someone came tomorrow and there was actually, they go through these files and they find, oh no, come to find out that is real. I'm like, well, okay, I was wrong, because I've been wrong. It's definitely been wrong about things. You can't go into this research with all the mysteries and the links and the different phenomena associated with it and go like, oh, there's nothing to that.
Yeah.
Like the hitchhiker phenomenon. As I've shared earlier, I've seen these things on 2 occasions. For years and years and years, I never, as a hitchhiker thing, that's just hysteria. They're just equating that. But I think I sent you the photos. I sent them to one person. I woke up one morning with like scratches across my cheek and scratches across my back 2 days later. I go, what the hell? And I go like, no, this is so textbook, woo stuff. I even to this day, if I took the photographs and immediately sent them to 2 friends just so I could document it. And then, a couple of days later, I woke up with this large, looked like scar on my knee, which did go away, but I photographed it.
Yeah.
And I just go, if you would have asked me before that time, is there anything, the hitchhiker effect, is that real? I would say absolutely not. There's nothing to it.
You got to be careful on what you let in, because sometimes if you let something in based on its strength, you'll never be able to get it out. Well,
I've always felt the reason I left AARO in 1980 was because of my 1979, experience. Yeah. And my belief then, as it is to this day, is I was interviewing all these other abductees, and I was very upfront and very involved and going to where they went and speaking with them at length and stuff. And I think I attracted whatever.
Oh, it's like, oh yeah, look at this guy. He's talking to one of the people we know. He's ready for it. Come on, Bill, let's bring one down and show it to him,
Yeah. Who is this guy? We're talking about the...
who's this guy? They already knew exactly who you were.
I think they're curious about what goes on, just like we would be curious. We're talking about the tri-state drones, and I'm kind of frustrated because there are actual drones there, but they're being conflated with actual UAP. And what I've shared with people, look, the drones are real, but so are the UAP. They're attracted to the drone. They're going like, what the hell's going on? And they're probing the drones. So, but people, they have an on or off switch. It's either they're all UFOs or they're not UFOs. Not the way it works. But I think they're curious and they're attracted to people that get their nose in. So
I'd say they're more strategic than they are curious.
What's that?
They're more strategic than they are just curious.
Well, it's a quest for knowledge.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're out there doing stuff, just like we're out there doing stuff, and we throw something on the wall, see what sticks, and I think they do the same thing.
There's someone who pops up on the radar all of a sudden for the different things that are going on. They're saying, wait a minute, they've gone a bunch this level. Who is that person? Let's go find out.
Yeah. And we're not dealing, I've never believed, even back in my AARO days, that we were dealing with a single solitary, race. There were just too many. If you go back to the 70s and you read the AARO bulletins, I mean, today you got like 4 major. You've got the Aryans, you've got the mantis, you've got the reptiles, and you've got the grays. But you go back to the 70s to cases which I call one-offs, where you've got like hairy dwarfs, you got people that look like they're in spacesuits.
We do have 2 midgets on a horse here.
You've got all kinds of things.
Yeah.
You really, but I called them one-offs because they were seen one time and never seen again.
And if there's not a pattern, that's where there's something you have to throw up a flag and say, wait a second here. We've got something here. It's only a one-off. If we don't see a pattern of different things like this along the way, for me, that throws up a red flag saying it sounds like something someone could be imagining more than something somebody actually experienced.
Exactly. Oh, you're absolutely right about that, Thomas.
You had some, the hairy dwarf phenomenon was very well reported. I say
they're like mini Bigfoots.
Yeah, I say it's a one-off, but it wasn't only seen one time. It was just, rare. We don't hear about it all anymore.
Yeah.
But it was widely reported in South America. It was widely reported in the United States for a time, and then it just stopped, and we don't hear about it anymore.
Yeah.
But there are other one-offs which, you have very credible people, very responsible people, even some with physical evidence that something happened one time. And you just go, what the hell was that? I mean, why did that happen? I remember this was in 1977, a New Zealand farmer. He was going out his back door of his farm, and a few yards away from his back door, this UFO lands. The door opens, and what everyone used to call at that time a humanoid comes down a ramp and waves at him. And he's just shocked. He's standing there looking at this, classic saucer-shaped UFO, and he just raises his hand, waves back at the humanoid, turns around, goes back in the ship, closes, takes off. And that was it. And you go, what the hell was that? I mean, what was that about? Was that like an accident? Did they land the wrong place? What was that about? Guy was very credible. There were traced, landing marks out on his farm. He wasn't the kind of person to make something like this up. But didn't suffer from delusions or anything. Never seen anything like. There are many cases like that. A very prominent one is the French farmer who was found the two aliens in his garden, and they froze him with some little rod.
But that's not the one who were making pancakes, is it?
No, that's the other. That's the other guy. That's a very interesting. He never changed his story either. That guy. They came down and they motioned that they wanted something to drink water, and he brought him a pitcher. And he brought it back, and he could see inside the ship, and they looked like they were cooking something on what he made out to be a stove. And he traded them the water for the pancake thing. And again, it's one of these weird stories. You go like, and he had the pancake, and they checked it. They said there was nothing really unusual about it. But it's not the kind of story that you would take to your grave with you.
No.
I mean, it didn't do him any good. He didn't write books. He wasn't a celebrity or anything. He was kind of off-put about it.
What about the one-off of Admiral Byrd when he went down to Antarctica? And they lost all these people. They supposedly had battles with UFOs, and they came back with a crippled fleet with a lot of people dead.
Yeah, that's a very controversial story. The diary, there was a diary purported to be written by Berg. It came up. I think that diary is still in question whether or not that's an authentic diary. But on one radio interview he said, there are craft capable of going from the South to the North Pole in seconds. That was Operation High Jump, and the story was that they were going to, and everybody till this day are very interested in Antarctica as a station, as a base of operations, and they were going down there to test if they could do it. And the cover story, if it is a cover story, is that the weather was really bad and people were dying from the weather. It was just really bad, and they had to get the hell out of there before more. I think 8 people died or so. But what's the truth of that? I really don't know. It's still out there. It's a very controversial story, and I don't think anybody knows the real truth of what actually occurred there. But
maybe that could come in after Roswell and before we had the incident over Washington, D.C. I think Byrd fits somewhere in there, somewhere in the middle there.
Well, we have a whistleblower, one of these guys that did speak before Rubio. This is over the last 3 years, who who worked down there at one of the Antarctic bases as a fire chief. He, yeah, you're familiar with the guy?
Yeah, the guy who said the one sensor we have was there for going ahead and generating all this mass energy and going and causing earthquakes worldwide.
Yeah. It's an earthquake weapon. So he did speak officially before. He is one of those 40 people that spoke before the Senate Intelligence Committee and stuff. And I know they took it seriously. So see, this is the thing, is these people testify before these Senate intelligent people. The Senate intelligent people don't give them feedback. They don't say, oh, yeah, that's really interesting because we know about this base or that. But they don't tell them that. They just like, hey, tell me your story, present your proof. He had photographs and documents and stuff that he presented. And they go, thank you very much. We'll be back in touch. And that's it. Now, I know from my personal experience, anytime we were sending intelligence upline, that's it. You send it upline, you're never hearing anything more about it. You just send it upline. You're never going to get an attaboy. Oh, that was good. That worked out. That was true. That wasn't true. You just send it upline. And that's it. Did that solve it? Was that guy really a terrorist? Did they really have the anthrax? You don't hear. You just send your intelligence upline, and that's it. And it's the same thing that's happening with the Senate Intelligence and Select Congressional Intelligence Committee. The witnesses have presented their stories same way they did the IG. They take all the information, they take their depositions, they take any evidence they have, and then they conduct their investigation. Atkinson just wasn't doing anything with it. He wasn't going to the locations and stuff and saying, hey, is this true? Is this real? Blah, blah. He just wasn't doing it, just saying on it. And so what Luna wants to do, and this is always important, is this actionable intelligence. When we talk about stuff that happened during the Kennedy administration, or maybe before that, Roswell, is it actionable? Or did all those people die? Is that a dead end at that point? Because, as I said, what Curso was sharing is that, yeah, this is word of mouth. I'm one of the last people at APRO. I think there's one or two people that were still, working with APRO, but all of them are dead that I know. They're all gone. So, and the files were kind of conned away.
That's the fact! Shit. Sorry about that.
The board, when Coral passed away, the board gave the files to this couple in Sedona who were supposed to create an archive and a library and stuff, and instead they just held the stuff hostage. And I know the library in New Mexico that was opened up recently, they're trying to get those files. I had a few of the files that I gave to Richard, historical files on radar information and on retrievals and stuff. And so I gave them to Richard because he's a historian. But we had 16 filing cabinets full of documents. We helped Springfield put together his retrieval book on retrievals. And all that information is somewhere in Sedona, trying to get it back. But I know there'd be good reveal. Danny talks about when he went to the National Archives, found that retrieval footage that it was on, what do you call it? Not microfilm. Well, it's microfilm, microfiche.
Yep, that's it.
And we got a microfiche. Jim was transferring everything to microfiche, all the files and stuff, the last couple of years, I think starting in 1977. And I asked him, where do we get the money to buy all this equipment? Because literally to be a member of APRO at that time, and I think at our peak, we had like 3,000 members. It was $8 a year, not a month, a year. And they had written, Jim and Coral had written like 8 books, but even back then, you're not going to get rich writing books. I don't have any idea because we had a top-notch, office there with very high security for the time. And I just don't know where the money came from. But he had a microfiche that when Danny said about that microfiche, I go, oh, we had a microfiche thing. We were transferring everything to microfiche. And we had one room where Jim did all that work, had the microfiche machine and the camera and everything was copying the files. And he did remark, you know, that it was an expensive process at the time. And I just thought, oh, cool, you know, we're going high class. But there were 17 cabinets full of files, you know, going.
Wasn't there a break-in at the office at one point?
Oh, there were many times. I witnessed. I arrived there at the same time as Jim did one morning, and we, again, at the time, this doesn't sound unusual today, but it had a coded lock and cameras and everything. And we code in, we open the door, and everything's on the floor. All the file cabinets been open, all the files have been thrown around. And I was shocked. It looked like a scene from, you know, an X-Files movie, you know, where they go in and ransack the office. And Jim was just very calm about it. I said, oh my God, you know, what might they have taken? He says, well, I'm not worried about what they took. He says, I'm worried about what they may have planted. And I go, oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah, they could plant bugs. They could plant, you know, fake files, any kind of thing. And I said, this happened before. Oh, yeah. He said, it happens all the time. That was the second office we had. That was the last office. The first office was a little bit smaller. The second office had very high, like I said, physical security. Had only one door in, one door out. And it had a single code that I did not have, only Jim, Coral, and I believe, although I'm not positive, that the secretary who was there on the days that Jim was off had the code to it. But yeah, it was routinely broken in. And I know now from Doty and Bill Moore that they were, at least my understanding is it was after I left in 1980 that they began spying on the operation. But honestly, I didn't really have a lot of trust in the secretary we had. She was not a friendly person. And I wouldn't, you know, apparently, according to Moore and Doty, that they bribed her to give them information on calls coming in.
That's what I heard as well, Alan. Yeah.
But I was gone at that time. I was still communicating with them because we were working on the Andreessen case at that time with Ray Fowler. That was the last case I worked on. And I you know, as I've shared with Richard at that time, Tucson was a hub of espionage. I mean, we had the Strategic Air Command there. We had Hughes aircraft. We were ringed by Titan missiles. It was, you know, it was a small town at that time, 250,000 people. And of course, AARO, anybody calling into AARO, the military would be interested in. Now, I think, looking back on it, that Jim probably was working directly with the administration from an executive standpoint, that he was working with the Carter executive staff, and that Doty's counterintelligence operation, that was Air Force. Now, Jim was former Air Force intelligence. He had the same, he did the same thing as Doty. Doty talks about his counterintelligence. His counterintelligence was radio counterintelligence, signals data, and Ray Fowler was did the same thing too. And I'd had a small contract with Bell Helicopter where we did cryptograph stuff, and it was signals intelligence, and it's far different than the counter surveillance intelligence that I did with DHS. Completely different thing. It's more along the line, communications data. It's like the Palladium incident we were talking about, where you're spoofing things, you're jamming equipment, you're intercepting information. Jason, there, what's his name? Guy came up recently. Jason, you know who I'm talking about? Very controversial guy.
Sands. Jason Sands.
Jason Sands. What he was doing was basically data,
He was on a red team that did signals intelligence.
Yeah, signals intelligence. And that's the same thing that Jody was doing. That's the same thing that Jim did, supposedly in the Air Force, although they were running Appo at the Air Force Base there for almost 8 years. So I don't think he spent much time doing the signals data counterintelligence thing. But so it's much different than being a field operative and actually being in the field and doing counter surveillance detection, which was in my case, where you're actually going out in the field and doing things and you're training people to do it. And very, very different thing. We had, we would test other units, like Sands was talking about red team. No, Baker there, Jake
Barber.
Jake Barber. He was talking about red team, blue team assault. We did that in counter surveillance. We would have a team that had a protection detail, and then we'd be the opposing red team that was trying to assassinate the principal of that team. And it was all, pretend, but, it involved, counter surveillance, disguises, different things. And we would play that out in urban settings, over 3 or 4 days. That's field work. That's not like sitting in a trailer, intercepting or jamming materials or listening in on conversations. It's a completely different thing.
Right, but if you remember, Alan, Jim spent a lot of time alone in that office by himself.
Yeah, absolutely. He was very secretive, couldn't meet a nicer guy. Very nice, but he only spoke when spoken to. He had something to say, he would share it, and that was it. There was no small talk. The only thing he small talked about, he had a open heart surgery, and he wouldn't stop talking about that. He was really
the zipper on the chest with a scar on.
He showed that to everybody.
Right.
And, it was he looking back on now. Yeah, this definitely was a tell, and that's what Wendell had told me, that they were both blue berets, and I didn't know what that was at the time. I go like, is that like Green Beret? That's what I'm thinking, because it's during the Vietnam War. I think, this must be like the Air Force's version of the Green Beret. That they're special forces kind of guys, but no, it was intelligence. And like I said, they were running Appo right out of the Air Force Base office that they knew about, because the Air Force knew about it, because they were using base postage and stuff. So it wasn't something being hidden. But there was a lot going on back then. At that office with Jim. Yeah.
And no one knows for sure what his hands were involved in at the time.
No. I know Brandon Chase, who was the director for that movie, UFOs Are Real, was a CIA asset. We only learned that a short time ago. I first learned it from Steve Bissett. I go, oh my God, that was the director for our movie. I had no idea. He was CIA. So the CIA had a hand in producing that film, and it's still rated good. Although there's some stuff, you look back on that film, some stuff that's kind of dated now. Like they open with that UFO over Catalina Islands, a very famous film. But we knew at the time, we told them not to use it. We said, hey, that's a Piper Cub landing on Catalina. When we blew it up at the Kodak Center up in Phoenix, and you could see the shadow of the wing on the side of the plane. It was clearly a Piper prop plane, but they used it anyway. It was going 120 miles an hour. It certainly wasn't anything anomalous, but they opened the movie. They opened the movie with that. Oh, this is a real UFO. No, it's not. But again, the CIA was involved in production of that film, which, like I said, I didn't know until this, literally like 2 years ago.
So there was obvious disinformation going on, you would have to say.
Yeah, I believe, that was like, it's hard to say, because there's some good stuff in there. I mean, we weren't, Wendell has a big part in that. I was in the film, but I ended up on the cutting room floor. So my part isn't in there. But there's some good information in there, but that particular one, when I first saw the movie, I go, oh my God, that's terrible. But Jesse Marcel his first on-camera interview is in there, and of course that's very credible. He's a very credible individual, and that really introduced him to the wider public. As I said, it wasn't a secret. Roswell wasn't a secret, and I shared that with Richard, because Richard would say we didn't know about it until in the 1980s. I'm like, no, I mean, everyone knew.
Bill Moore came out with that book.
Yeah, but like I said, we already knew about it. There were books before Bill's book. We knew about Roswell. We knew about Gerardo Bay. We knew about Aztec. It wasn't, again, communication wasn't such as today. You have hundreds and hundreds of publications repeating these same stories, and it's really gotten out there in the zeitgeist. But we knew about all these things, and there oftentimes we wondered if they were conflating the Aztec crash with the Roswell crash, because we only had scant details about the two. And go like, was this? Because we knew there were at least two craft, not just one craft, that crashed at Roswell. And go like, is this the second craft they're talking about? And they found it. We didn't know, but we did know about it before Jesse ever came out and contacted Jim and talked about it. But after that time, into the 80s, it really became a big deal. And Wendell was very much involved in that too. He hobnobbed with all those guys there in the early 80s, and he did a lot of documentaries that you can see on Tubi. And
Wendell was also the one looking for the second Roswell craft, and he found it at that mountaintop. But then it was recovered by the Air Force.
Yeah, I think it was like
before he got it.
Yeah, I think it was about a year later. Well, Wendell had at least 7 metamaterial fragments that he believed were from UFO searching the Roswell site. I don't know if they were ever tested by the university. I never saw them myself when I was there. I've seen pictures of them on the video documentaries that he did later, but I didn't see them. I didn't know about the tuba materials that actually was Jim and Coral that got that material from one of our people down in Brazil, and that's what Gary Nolan has that he's been experimenting with. I never saw that material either when I was there, but it was there. It was, like I said, we had 16 file cabinets full of stuff, and that material Gary keeps on it's a plexiglass container on his desk that he does the interviews on. There's another artifact that well documented, tested, and you hear about this so often, and I don't know where all these things end up about UFOs dripping metal. There was a guy in Las Vegas, had a second witness with his girlfriend when this craft shot out one of these projectiles, of molten metal. And he let it cool, collected it, and it was tested at Los Alamos and found to have isotopes, not of this earth. And as far as I know, I don't know if he's still alive or not, but I know he still has it. And they took a specimen out, like I said, and he posts the information from Los Alamos, and it was certainly anomalous. But there have been many other times. I was surprised that that's such a common thing over the years, these craft dripping metal. Why they do it, I don't know. What he showed to me looked very similar to what was being used in Iraq, these shape charges where you have molten copper that's shot out explosively. The explosive charge makes the copper melt, and you have this liquid projectile go right through a tank. And that's what when it froze, it hit the dirt, and when he took it out of the dirt, that's what it looked like to me. It looked like that type of shape charge. But so
he still has that material?
Pardon?
You said you don't know if he's still alive, but do you know if he still has that material?
Yeah, it's still around. I can send pictures. He's been on a number of documentaries over the years. It's a very famous case and a very famous artifact. And I tried to get a hold of him at one time because I wanted to make a cast of the thing so it doesn't disappear. I wanted to make a silicone cast of it, but I was never able to get a hold of him.
Well, we could talk after the show. If you could find him, if he's still around, we could do some scientific analysis on that material and establish one way or the other what it is.
Well, they did. They analyzed it as at Los Alamos, and it did have isotopes that were not, of this Earth. And he had documents to show that, and Los Alamos admits to analyzing it. But it's one of those things. This was, I think, it was late '90s. This occurred, and it's one of those things where it's just swept under the carpet. They're like, oh yeah, this is anomalous, and yeah, it's got weird isotopes, and we don't know where it comes. But that's it. Nothing to see here. Move along.
But 30 years later, there's a lot more testing that could be done now that couldn't be done then.
Sure.
So you never know. I mean, like Thomas mentioned, we work directly with Falcon Space, and they work on this type of material. So if it's still around,
if he's still around and he's willing to, I think he'd be, interested in, doing a second test.
Yeah, why not? Because if anything came from it, he would get all the credit for it.
Well, he didn't seem to be one that looking for credit. He was really frustrated that, he was treated with just like people were in the 80s and 90s with ridicule, and this is a hoax, and you're making this up, and no, he had a witness to what happened, and so it's one of these things like no one would make something like this up. He wasn't making any money from it. It only cost him, his reputation and hair pulling, trying to get this thing analyzed and stuff. So it's. There's so much, and I really think, particularly today, these debunkers on the internet, like we're seeing with all this stuff at USAID, these people are paid. They're paid to debunk this stuff, and you've got bots and stuff that are going on UFO Twitter and stuff and causing a ruckus and getting everyone to fight with everyone. I mean, people are still just chasing their tail about the dark drones.
Well, let's take a look at Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick and the disinformation that he continued to spread even after he left his position at AARO.
Well, coming in, he was extremely suspect. We knew the lab that he ended up to. He was promised that job, and I knew he was promised that job before he started AARO. And that wasn't hidden. That was well known, and everyone said he's probably just going to do this for a year and then quit and go to his other job. He was a plant, and they said, "Hey, we're going to give you this job, but you got to do us a favor." And you see that in the entertainment industry all the time, oh, we're going to let you do your dream movie, but first you got to do these sick crap movies that we got scripts for.
Deal with the shit.
Yeah.
Pay your dues.
First, and then you can do your dream movie. And that's what they did with Kirkpatrick. We're going to give you this dream job at Oak Ridge. But first, you got to sit on this panel. We just want you to debunk all this stuff, and it'll die a death. Because the UAP task force was the one that got all this witnesses.
The real work. They did the actual work.
Yeah.
They did the actual work, and Go and the others at the Pentagon say,
that's because it was controlled by the Navy, not by the Air Force, not by the DOD. So we were actually able to get some answers.
And that's very interesting because that goes back to what we were talking about here with the shoot down at Triple Prime. The Navy got that craft, and they wouldn't give it to the Air Force. And the Air Force was pissed off about it. And there's a memo which also surfaces in the 1995 MJ, the Majestic 1995 documents, talking about the Air Force being pissed off that they can't have access to the Navy's recovery. And I've shared this on Richard's show. You have to remember there was what got the rivalry going was originally the Navy was supposed to be in charge of the space program. Project Vanguard was their first attempt at launching a satellite, and that failed. And so they handed NASA off to the Air Force instead. And there's been a rivalry ever since then between the two. The Navy felt the Air Force is trying to control the narrative, and so they refused to give them access to the debris recovery they got from the test, the Triple Prime test, where they got shot the ship down with the X-rays. So yeah, that, and also too, as I've shared, COVID was the black swan that chased all the gatekeepers out of Washington, D.C. and left the hen house unguarded. And so all these guys started coming out of the woodwork and talking to David and his investigators, which wouldn't have happened I don't think, if COVID hadn't shut everything down there in Washington. And even today, a lot of this conflation, and again, a little bit off topic, but about the drone thing, there's well, did the FAA know or the FAA didn't know? Look, you only got 4% of the people in Washington showing up to work in their offices. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. So I think both things can be right. Maybe the FAA knew, maybe the other people in the FAA didn't know about the drones. I know, because I have a link to the contracts that were written, that New Jersey is drone central. Cory Booker didn't even know about the situation. You have at least 4 major drone testing institutes in greater New Jersey. 4 of them, and they all have DoD contracts. So anyone saying, "Oh no, we didn't know," and the FAA didn't know, BS. They knew. Either those politicians are ignorant about what people do in New Jersey, or what. That is drone central. They have drones coming out of their ears there. The New Jersey Aviation Institute is the largest drone testing site in New Jersey. It's 30 minutes from Morristown, and they admit to testing drones at that time. And Petro Tectonics, which is in Colorado, which I believe was responsible for the 2019 drone swarm that they saw in Colorado, admitted to Fox News when they asked them. They said, "Do you know anything about these drones in New Jersey?" And they said, "We can't comment on them." That to me is yes. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't any UAPs in there. I believe there were just probably as many UAPs as there were drones. But the drones are just like these cars we have here in the Bay Area, autonomous cars, and you have to put them through their steps. They have learning algorithms, and you have to send them out again and again and again, and they build up their learning modules.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why you see swarms of them over bases and swarms of them over special sites and stuff. That's where they're sending them. And this thing about, oh, they came out of the ocean. Okay. And I shared this with Richard when he was writing the book. I said, you have to be careful about this things coming out of the ocean, because if you're standing on the deck of a ship on the ocean, you can only see 2.9 miles to the horizon. Anything beyond that, coming out of the horizon, is going to look like it's coming out of the ocean, but it's actually just coming over the horizon. So when you see something coming ostensibly off the horizon, you're going to need more than it came out of the water. You can't tell. Now, George Knapp, and I've seen 4 videos that I can say for certainty were USOs coming out of the water, because in George Knapp's video that he released a couple of weeks ago was one of the best of this. The UFO is fluorescent green. When it descends to the water and enters the water, it lights up the water. So you know for certain that is entering the water, because you can visually see it lighting up the water. And I've seen one in the Mediterranean, 2 in the Mediterranean like that, where the light is in the water, and it's large, blue, weird looking light. It's not bioluminescence. It's definitely some type of strong light source. And that's the only way you can tell it, because Richards repeated this, and I know the senator for New Jersey repeated it, and it was the mayor of New Jersey repeated it, and he had heard from the sheriff that they saw a dozen UFOs coming off from the ocean and following a Coast Guard ship. It was a female sheriff's officer. She didn't say they came out of the ocean. She said they came off the ocean. And the petrodynamics craft are ship-to-shore drones. That's their purpose. And they can carry up to 500 pounds payload. They're very fast. And this thing, they're loitering too long. No, even the average loiter time for like a Predator drone is 40 hours. And they're a medium range drone. So 6 hours, which is identical to what the Petroelectronics drone has. It has a 6 hour loiter time.
Yeah, you're the one who actually went and put us towards and showed us the XP4, the XP5, the XP7, the XP9, all these drones that tied back to almost what we were seeing on the East Coast, Alan. Yeah,
that's right.
I do believe there are definitely, and I've seen them. I've seen great videos of what are definitely what I would call UAP or UFOs in that same area, and I think they're just curious about these drones. But I do believe that was responsible for the main flap.
Exactly.
And I do believe that was the ones they saw in Langley as well. And Ross has a very good video of that. And clearly these things have FAA lights. They're coming into Langley. They're coming in one after another at a 30-degree angle, and then going back, and the next one comes and goes back. And clearly looks to me, this is system, it's organized.
Whoa.
And I think Langley is just lying that they didn't know what they were. I think they absolutely knew what they were, and this was just a programming operation. And because it's you're to take and shut down that base just on a whim. Oh, we don't know what they are, so we're going to take all our planes and leave. That's millions of dollars. It's just once you fly one of those F-22s, you've got 18 hours of maintenance for every 1 hour of flight time. So you're not going to take your entire fleet and take it somewhere else unless you're told to.
No, you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, but we do have two people with their hands up. We have two people have their hands up for a while. We're in overtime at this point. Daryl Zernick, your hand is up, my friend. Great conversation, though, Alan. It's been wonderful.
Alan, I just have to ask this question because is Bronze Armory Studio, is that you?
Yes. Yeah.
So, oh my God. So some people are going to do some double takes in this chat right now when I say that Alan is responsible for bringing Battlestar Galactica to life. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've worked on actually my career in the entertainment field began in the late 70s. In fact, if you go back and listen to the interviews I did with Richard,
are you talking the original the original Battlestar Galactica or the reboot?
David Moore or Glenn A. Lawson?
No, more Twiggy.
I worked on both. The second, the British one, I did some autograph pieces for that for a company. But
we're talking Lauren Green.
When Battlestar Galactica ended, I'll tell you a little inside story about that. I was at Universal Studios at that time. I was actually there on vacation with my first wife, and I wanted to show her around the studio. And we went to the makeup department, and one of my friends working there was, with Battlestar Galactica. He says, "Hey, the show's been canceled." I'm like, "Oh, damn! It was really good." Was something that's interesting that people don't know? When that show came out, originally the Cylons were not robots. Originally, the Cylons were supposed to be reptiles. They were supposed to be reptiles, and they were cannibalizing the humans. But that was the height of the censorship thing. And they go like, no, that's too gory. We can't have, aliens eating people. That's just gonna make people hysterical. So and they didn't want the reptiles were too personalized. Like, I know what you talk about, but they didn't want them killing them. They were too human-like, so they didn't want them killing them. There was only one reptile left that you only see from a distance on the throne thing, the head guy, and they got rid of that later. But you can't really see it. But they had these beautiful, reptile masks, and they had different ones that chameleon looking, but that all went aside. Well, anyhow, the show was canceled. And so they said, hey, we got to get rid of all these props. And so we literally took all the helmets and just took them outside to the near the parking structure and just busted them on the side of the wall, threw them in the trash load. I kept two for myself. I still have one. I gave another one to a friend. But they just went to the trash load. That's how we treated props back then. Today,
that reminds me of their talk about when they were doing all the old animations at Warner Brothers. They threw them in a big pile and they were sledding down them from the cells of animation.
It wasn't until really the late 90s that studios. We always considered this stuff is junk. Props are junk. You can't keep it. Universal Studios was an interesting thing because they had their wardrobe thing was like 5 stories tall. It looked like a giant dry cleaners inside. They have those belts where all the clothes are on dry cleaners. It went up 5 stories, and they had stuff from the silent era, costumes from the silent era. They didn't throw anything away, and you had these library cards that you'd go through to find, like Ron Chaney's cape or whatever. They had all this stuff and had a number assigned to it. And you pull it out. They had all of Lucille Ball's, clothes from her shows and stuff. And I don't know if they still have that at the park now, but back then when I was there, it was actually still a working studio. The last television show shot there was a $6 million woman. That they were still filming that when I was there last. But yeah, that, and I've got one of the jackets too from that. And we did I think it was year before last. We did an exhibition with some of the British guys from the British show, and we brought some of the old props, the helmet and costumes and stuff from the original show, just as an exhibit there. So it was fun. It was fun.
I just have to say, Allan has got a total other life. He's designing things for Iron Man, Captain America movies.
Didn't you do the Infinity Glove, Allan?
Yes. Yeah, I did the model. There, you see it. There, I'll send you a video that ABC did an interview of me at the exhibit we have here at the San Francisco Cartoon Art Museum. And that's pretty extensive exhibit.
There you go. There's a picture of you with the Infinity Glove. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of my projects, 3D printing that I was experimenting with. That has 30 files for that glove. It lights up and stuff. It's got electronics in it. Of course, for the film, they do capture motion, and they scan that, and then they can do whatever they want with it in there. But that was I worked on Endgame, and we took that exhibit to Japan, and was there for the premiere of Endgame in Tokyo, which was a lot of fun.
Wow.
But yeah, and you'd be amazed, like Brandon Jace, who was with the CIA, who worked on our film. You'd be surprised how much entertainment and intelligence industry bleeds over.
You go hand in hand.
Yeah.
For
when
decades.
I approached Jim originally after my first experience in 1974, my objective was to actually do scale models and illustrations and stuff for Appo. I just thought it was an interesting thing. What's his name does that now? Michael Drapp. He does all these models. Well, that was my intention to do with Appo, and I did do quite a few. And then later on with the Jimmy Carter thing, we did even more. But that was my initial thing. But Jim, I didn't understand. I was a young, naive kid. I didn't understand this is actually an intelligence operation. They're doing this stuff. And he would just say, hey, while you're there, interview this guy or do this or do that. Don't take notes, but, I want you to brief him when you come back. I was just a naive kid. I didn't know. I think it was 2021. Yeah. And I had no idea that, and it began to dawn on me as time went by, hey, wait, there's a lot more to this than I think. And I ended up doing much more, more interviews and investigation and stuff than I was doing, any artwork. But that's how I actually started with Appo. It was supposed to be an art project, basically.
Absolutely wonderful. Last question from Nick. Nick, your hand's been up for almost the entire show.
Sorry, Nick.
Yes. Do you believe, Allan, that in 2004, JSOC and Lockheed Martin, had a firefight? Do you believe that, Allan? Have you heard of that, Allan?
In fact, if you go back to, there's a very famous firefight, and I just shared this with John Stewart because he's been talking about the firefight in 2004. The very famous one in 1977 between American forces and Mexican forces. Now, the claim is that the Mexican forces died from exposure from the craft. I've always contended that they died of lead poisoning, because if they died from exposure, why didn't the Americans die from exposure? So I believe what happened there was also a firefight. And there's been rumors of that for a long time. Yeah. If you're going into other countries to retrieve this stuff, there's going to be a big fight. There's on Eyes on Cinema. There's a pilot who was at a crash site in Texas, between Texas and Mexican line, and he talks about that crash recovery. Very credible guy. You can find that on Eyes on Cinema. I don't recall his name, but he told the story. He was in his late 80s, early 90s when he did the interview. But very credible story. And he had a firsthand eyewitness, and it was the Mexican government in cooperation with the American government, this is in the 1950s, they were collecting, this craft. But so, you go into another country and try and take their stuff, there's going to be a fight.
Do you also believe the 1979 incident at Dulce Base? For which do you believe that one?
I don't. I've looked into the guy there. I looked deep into his history. He says he lost his fingers, in that fight. No, he lost his fingers to diabetes, in the late 70s. He was diabetic, and he had open heart surgery as a result, and had first stents and then veins put on his heart because it was just closing up. That's why he was wheelchair bound when he died, because he had lost his lower legs. Now, whether or not he hung himself or he was actually murdered, no, he was certainly being a pain, spreading stuff. Could someone want to just shut him up? Maybe. But I think it's more likely they committed suicide. He was in real bad shape. And he probably when you get diabetes like that and they start hacking you away, suddenly, how much are they going to take? But yeah, he did not lose his fingers in a firefight. He lost them to diabetes.
How about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. What a great conversation, a great opportunity to hang out with friends. More importantly, I want to go ahead and remind everybody, thanks to Allan and Mike and your persistence and everything, we actually have, let me go ahead and bring this up here, Richard Dolan coming on Thursday. Granted, we're not usually on Thursdays, but we're going to be on Thursday this time to go ahead and talk about his new book, A History of USOs. First time we've had Richard Dolan on this channel. And Allan, a big thanks to you, my friend, for going ahead and arranging to have Richard Dolan be on the show.
He's very excited about it.
Yeah.
It's going to be a hell of a show.
Yeah.
Just like when you come on, it's going to be a great conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's much more knowledgeable than I am. Him, particularly on the USO subject. He knows. He's got a great memory. I have to write things down, on my notes. I go like, study, but he knows all this stuff by heart. Knows names, dates, places, just off the tip of his tongue. He's very good at that.
Where did he get a lot of his research for the new books? Did he deal with the Navy on some of this?
It's been 3 years. It's enormous. He'll share it on the podcast. He was talking about on the site the other day, all kinds of, sources, with the Navy, with a number of other sites that specialize in USOs. He's a good friend of Carl Nels and Timothy, too, Admiral Timothy Gallaudet. He's met with them in Washington a number of times. In fact, Carl specifically asked him to do some different things in the book. So he's very connected, with that, and he'll tell you more about it on Thursday. I don't want to, ruin the surprise.
It'll be a good one. I'll hope to have you back for that again. And it's been a great time having you here tonight, Allan. Thank you very much for coming out. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Well, I hope everyone enjoyed it, and if anybody has any questions, pass along to Thomas, and he can pass it along to me. I'll be glad to answer them.
Absolutely. Hang out in the back, Allan, for a minute if you could. I just want to thank everybody for coming out for tonight's episode of Disclosure tonight. Yeah, different kind of a format, but when we have someone like Allan on, we're going to have Richard on later in the week. Sometimes it's just, let's take the format, throw it to the side, and focus on our guests. Thank you for coming out tonight, Allan.
My pleasure.
And Mike, thank you for being a part of this, and I thank everyone in the back as well.
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't have missed it for anything. Having Allan on is always a treat, and it's always a great conversation.
Absolutely. As we usually say, Mike, at the end of every episode of Disclosure tonight, eyes open, no fear, be safe, everyone, but
go back to Party City where you belong.
Absolutely. We'll catch you on the flip side. Good night, everybody. Y'all come back now. Here, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you, Allan.